I see we have a few people on from New York and central Pennsylvania. Of course, Daniel's in Minnesota, Paige from the South. So really great to have a wide range of people representing different areas of the Northeast and I guess the central states as well. It is 9 o'clock, so we are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Joy Beam. I will be the moderator of this morning's call. And once again, thank you all very much for making a point to join us this morning. We hope to have a really good call here today. At King's, we've noticed, and I'm sure you guys have noticed too, there's a lot of changing aspects in the silage market recently. There's brands entering, brands merging, brands exiting, and even some new technology. So I think a lot of producers are really questioning which path, which direction is the most profitable for their farm. So really our goal today is to answer a few basic questions about KingFisher, who we are, our breeding program, and then what makes our hybrids different from other options on the market. So just a few housekeeping items before we get started here. Of course, if you have any questions, feel free to enter them in the chat bar below, and we will try to field those as we go. At the end, we'll open it up for all general questions for the speakers. And then we do promise to keep this to a short and sweet 30 minutes. So you will be out and on your way by 9:30, and you can keep going with your day from there. So I'm going to introduce the speakers that we have in the lineup today. We were initially going to start with a video, but we were having trouble getting that to really play and go through the internet smoothly. So we're just going to start with our speakers, and then I will show you at the end where you can check that video out at. So as far as speakers for today, we're going to start with Daniel Olson. Daniel is a forage consultant based out of Wisconsin. Daniel specializes in digestible forages for large dairy farms and promotes KingFisher hybrids as part of that package. And Daniel will be discussing results of the World Dairy Forage Superbowl. After that, we have Rod Porter. Rod is the regional coordinator for King's AgriSeeds. He covers New York and the New England states. Rod is part of the KingFisher Corn Committee, and I would say he is a very integral part in making decisions on both production and direction of the brand. Rod will be giving an overview of who we are and how the KingFisher brand originated. And then last but not least, we also have Tracy Neff. Tracy is the head agronomist at King's AgriSeeds. And Tracy comes with really a wealth of experience in the seed industry. He's been there pretty much his whole career, and that has been a vital contribution to the KingFisher Corn Committee. He is the lead in screening hybrids adapted to the Northeast, and Tracy will be discussing how our selection of genetics leads to increased feedability on your farm. So speakers, thanks for joining us today, and we're just gonna keep this thing rolling. So once you're done with your section, we'll jump to the next speaker. So with that being said, Daniel, I will hand the call over to you.
Hey, thanks, Joy. So yeah, like Joy said, definitely KingFisher has been kind of making a name for itself, and a lot of that has to do with some of the results at the World Forage Superbowl, and that's held every year in conjunction with World Dairy Expo. You know, hundreds of samples get sent in there from around the country. A lot of the best dairies in the country submit samples, and over the last few years, KingFisher has been getting more and more success and finalists there. And you know, of course, the product, we feel pretty good about the product, but it's probably more a testimony to the farms that are actually planting it. Because what we notice over time, if you followed along with the Forage Superbowl results, is that some of the same farms year after year tend to grow these really high quality forages. And as those kind of progressive dairies have started including KingFisher in their forage lineup on their farms, we're seeing these samples now having this success at the Forage Superbowl. So the first KingFisher kind of jumped on the scene here about 3 years ago, had a sample, won the Forage Superbowl in 2018. And that was kind of a big story because nobody really knew what KingFisher was at that point. And that was a sample from Ohio. And then in 2019, they won again. And that was a sample from one of my dairies in Wisconsin. And in 2020 here, we just finished up the competition here earlier this month. KingFisher had the top 3 samples in the conventional corn silage category, had 4 of the top 5, really dominating it. And it's becoming pretty obvious that it's really, there's 2 major kind of silage players in the market now, at least involved on these kind of dairies, on this kind of in the competition, and that would be, you know, the old Mycogen, the Brevant, and KingFisher. And so of course the competition rewards outliers. Like anybody can win, right? And get lucky. And honestly, that first year, that's probably what KingFisher did. They only had a few samples submitted and they won. But over time, you start to see some trends. And the more samples that get submitted, the more years that get involved, we start seeing this kind of consistent success. And you start, you know, taking notice, and people have started taking notice. And that's really one of the major drivers of why KingFisher is growing as fast as it is right now in the corn silage market in the country. Now, there's a few things that the Forage Superbowl doesn't take into account. It looks at things like fiber digestibility and starch levels and milk per ton, but it doesn't look at some of the other aspects like UNDF 240 numbers or starch availability numbers. And those are things that we also feel like the KingFisher products, you know, excel at. And so while the competition doesn't give a complete picture of all the quality metrics that we look at within the company, or what I look at for corn on my dairies, it's a really good starting point, and it's something that is always fun to look at the results. Now, in the future, you know, KingFisher has added a couple BMR corns, and they're definitely going to be starting to see, you know, moving into that side of the competition as well. But the last few years, we've been, you know, they've been seeing a lot of success on the conventional corn silage market side of the competition. I think, you know, we can always have questions at the end, so I guess we'll move on. But yeah, once again, the top 3 samples, 4 of the top 5, 6 out of the top 10, pretty amazing year at the World Forage Superbowl.
Okay, thanks, Daniel. So I'm Rod Porter, work with King's AgriSeed and in the KingFisher Corn Development Committee. I'm going to talk a little bit about who KingFisher is and how KingFisher came to be. So I've got some slides. I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Is that showing up good, Joy? Okay. So who exactly is KingFisher? KingFisher is made up of 3 different companies. King's AgriSeed, of course, in the Northeast, Byron Seeds in the Midwest, and Southeast AgriSeeds in the Southeast. So we say we have the power of 3 together, working to obtain genetics and market genetics. And between the 3 companies, we're marketing in over 30 states across the US. So what's the value behind the KingFisher brand? Well, together we're able to access superior genetics, from the best breeding programs in the world. We're talking more about corn today than the other forages, but we also, of course, access other forage crops under the KingFisher brand. So the experience that the group brings, our staff that manages and supports the brand has literally hundreds of years of experience in the seed industry and specifically with forages. We feel that research is a key to being sure that we are in fact marketing the best varieties. And so we rely on our own research, research that's provided to us by the breeding companies, as well as university and third-party testing. So we have a multi-pronged approach to gaining data and confidence in the product that we have. And then one of our core values in the KingFisher brand is providing education, communicating the value of those genetics throughout our dealer network and to the producers that use the product. So we think that's very valuable. So the KingFisher product family, of course, we're talking mostly about corn this morning, but includes corn hybrids, organic, conventional, and traded. The KingFisher family also includes alfalfa varieties, grasses, forage blends, and summer annuals. So it's really a complete forage program. Like I say, the focus this morning is more on corn. Within the corn lineup, we have the non-GMO and conventional hybrids. We have organic hybrids. The traded hybrids are marketed under the Redtail brand. And then we have a few specialty hybrids such as high oil, male sterile, and also now bringing in a couple of BMR varieties, and spanning from the early 80-day maturity all the way up toward 120 days. So a pretty wide selection to cover the complete marketing area that KingFisher serves. We have seen a fair amount of customer success over the years. So like you heard from Daniel earlier, very good results in the World Dairy Expo Forage Superbowl. We've had numerous testimonials from producers on our corn and summer annuals, alfalfas. So we've had really positive feedback from our customers. So the momentum is really growing with the KingFisher brand. The brand has actually existed for a number of years, but since we added the KingFisher and Redtail corns and put more emphasis in the brand, it's really propelled KingFisher forward at a pretty incredible pace. So just within the corn hybrids alone, we've been nearly doubling sales every year since 2017. And we fully expect sales will double again in 2021. And while that's happening, all the other KingFisher forage products are continuing to grow strongly as well. So the KingFisher name is becoming much more common, much more well-known in the industry. And this all comes thanks to the full team, which is, starts from those responsible for bringing the genetics into the program, to the territory managers and the dealers that are providing the support and expertise to the producers, and those producers who are embracing the brand and achieving great success from it. So that is a quick snapshot of where KingFisher came from, who KingFisher is, what we're about, and the exciting momentum that's growing with the brand. So with that, I'll pass the presentation on to Mr. Tracy.
Thank you, Rod. I also have a small presentation I'll share in just a moment. In the development of any KingFisher product, the amount of testing that is going on is tremendous. Between Byron's and King's AgriSeeds and Southeast AgriSeeds, whether we're looking at forages that include things as Rod mentioned, like some of the winter grains, whether it's cool season grasses, whether we're looking at summer annuals like sorghum sedans and millets and forage sorghums and now corn. It's a pretty rigorous program that we do to test and evaluate these products. And we are looking, because we are a forage company, one of the big keys from a forage standpoint is fiber digestibility. That's what we can do to improve production, weight gain in beef, and just overall increase our production on these farms. If we can get a cow to eat more and have that digest quickly so that she can eat more again, the gains are what we realize from that. Now with corn, we also need to look at starch, and that's a very important part also. So let me share my screen here just a second. So the KingFisher products that we have, which in corn now include the KingFisher corn line and our red tail hybrids, we talk about Fibergest and the selection process that we do around this Fibergest grade of forage. And what we are looking at is the neutral fiber digestibility, the NDFD. And again, if we can increase the digestibility of a forage by having it digest faster in a cow and faster in other animals, then we get our bigger weight gains, we get higher milk production, and that's what we're looking for. And really in all the forages, this is one of the main drivers, because it's all about digestibility of forages. But likewise in corn, we also are using our SofStarch ranking and ratings to select hybrids that have high amounts of starch, but high amounts of easily digestible starch. Starch that is more available sooner in to the animal after harvest, and we use multiple time points of digestion through testing at labs to analyze that and make our selections. With the multitude of testing that goes on in the Midwest, in the Northeast, and in the Southeast, if we look at all the different forages, including corn and all those other forages I just mentioned, we over the last 3-4 years have collected thousands of samples of forage quality. And it's these thousands of samples that help us look at these varieties and then make our selections. When we look at SofStarch in corn, we still are very important looking at these charts that we're very familiar with, trying to select hybrids more like at the top that tend to have more of the floury starch in, that's more readily available sooner after harvest than some of the more glassy or hard starch or prolamine type starch that needs to be in the silo for several weeks for that to degrade with lactic acid and then have that improve. So moving forward, we're going to continue to look at improving not only just corn, but also all of our forages in trying to get better and higher fiber digestibility. And in corn silages, the same thing with additional looking at that starch digestibility. With that, I'm going to turn the presentation then back to Joy.
Great. Well, thank you to our speakers. We're actually finishing a little bit ahead of schedule today, but I think one question that is pretty common to people that are newer to our brand is it the same as BMR, or how does it compare to BMR? So Tracy, would you mind answering or just giving some background on KingFisher compared to BMR type hybrids?
Sure. So when we evaluate hybrids, and as Daniel mentioned, we are just moving into the world of having some BMR KingFisher hybrids that we're looking at this year. In forage testing, BMR usually does have higher fiber digestibility. But with our selections that we're doing with the KingFisher brand and the Redtail brand, we're getting very close BMR with that fiber digestibility. The other thing that has been kind of traditional for a lot of the BMR corn hybrids over the years is they've not had the highest starch digestibility. Now, those hybrids are being improved, but I would say right now, overall, with a lot of the BMR products that are on the market, we're close to fiber digestibility, but we do have, in my opinion, some of the better starch digestibility. Then with that, you have to consider some of the other agronomics that you need to be aware of when you're growing BMRs versus non-BMR hybrids. The use of fungicides, especially possibly a little bit of a reduced yield in a field, but we feel that our products, the KingFisher and the Redtail brand, can bring excellent fiber digestibility and really superior starch digestibility into a lot of these.
Great.
Yes. Joy, maybe I could add a little something there. So yeah, of course, everybody, likes BMR corn, once it's harvested. But because fiber digestibility is excellent in it, and if you let it in soil enough, the starch gets pretty good too. But there are some challenges with BMR corn. Of course, the starch amounts are really variable. Sometimes it really struggles with ear set and pollination. Tracy talked about disease pressure and some of those things. A lot of my farms, we're kind of approaching it more as on a systems approach. So if we're feeding a lot of corn silage and maybe some alfalfa, we're still looking at a lot of BMR corn, and that's where maybe some of these new BMRs are going to fit in on those farms. But as we bring other forages into the diet and into the crop rotation, a lot of the things that KingFisher excels in, things like, cool season grasses and BMR millets and sorghum sedans and things like that, we're bringing a lot of digestible fiber into the diet from those areas. And so then the starch becomes much more important. And the KingFisher corns, the conventional KingFisher corns, generally are going to have more starch and better quality starch than the BMR corns. And so we're maybe cutting our inclusion rates down a little bit on the corn silages, but we're able to maintain milk production, lower our ration cost, improve performance per acre by kind of approaching it more on a system than just BMR corn and alfalfa.
Those are some really, really good thoughts there. Hopefully everybody was kind of able to catch that. We did have a question that came in, and Daniel, we'll probably stick with you to field this question. This question is from Sam, but the question is, which hybrids are best suited to the Better Than BMR program? And I know you have some experience with that.
Yeah, so that was kind of my baby. Started it a number of years ago, just looking at how hybrids respond to spacing. And it's a little bit different than flex. So ear flex, I think we all know what that is, right? And that ability for cobs to expand. But stalk expansion is not exclusive to flex. In the total industry response. But there are a handful of the KingFisher hybrids that will respond to spacing and ultra low populations. I would say the earliest maturing one is probably 42C20. That's a 92-day corn. It's not going to be quite the same stalk expansion that some of the longer maturing corns do, but for a 92-day corn, it has some pretty good upside potential at low pops. Probably the next one would be 49C60, the 99-day. 52C20 has some potential, but I don't like it as good as 54C10. 54C10 has all kind of upside at low populations. I'm working with the 57C80 some, and that's kind of a newer one for me, so I'm only about a year in with it, where I usually like to have a couple years worth of data. So I think it might have some potential. And then moving up to the longer maturing corn, the red tail 112 day and the 100 both are going to fit with that system. So definitely not the whole lineup, but we probably have more hybrids that fit in that system than than any other company out there which might have one or two that fit.
Great, thank you. And Sam, hopefully that helped answer your question. Others who had the same question. Rod, I actually have a question for you next. Actually, we've been talking a lot about soft starch and more digestible starch. So I was curious if you could touch on how that relates to fermentation, especially through the fall, when a lot of dairy farmers are maybe seeing what we call the fall slump in milk production.
Sure. So first of all, let me qualify myself and say I'm not a nutritionist, but understanding how fall harvest and fermentation and fall feeding goes, what typically happens on farms is that when they are in a position to have to feed newly harvested corn silage soon after harvest, that the starch digestibility of that silage is not up to par. And the reason is because of the harder starch in many corns, and it takes a period of time, literally months, for the lactic acid and other enzymes to work at breaking apart those tight bonds, those prolamine bonds in the starch of the kernel to make that starch available for the cows to digest and utilize. So that is the advantage of the soft starch, that starch is not bound as tightly by prolamine. And so it is available at a much higher extent, much faster than standard corns out on the market.
So are you saying that by having the softer starch or ferment faster, that leads to a more level production through the fall instead of the decrease? Right,
definitely helps to level that out and reduce the trough of depressed milk production in the late fall and early winter. Of course, it's still best to have a what we call a cookout pile that's harvested early and set aside to feed early. But with many of the KingFisher hybrids, we're able to feed that right away after harvest and not see that fall slump. And that's mainly due to the starch availability, assuming that fermentation is happening as it should with any silage pile.
Great, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen real quick. For those of you interested in looking at hybrids and ordering ahead to next spring, I just want to show you where to get that. So just share my screen. One second. All right. Have to bounce around from the Zoom logistics. But this is our early order guide. And as you can see, we have our hybrids starting here. This would be our lower end of the hybrids. And then we have both our organic hybrids, our conventional hybrids, and our traded hybrids under the name of King or Redtail in the early order guide. So for those of you looking to get your lineup in this fall and be prepared for next spring, of course, you can contact the King's AgriSeeds office, any of the speakers on this call, or your local dealer for those. And then we also have early order programs running. The two we primarily use is our prepay program and then also our feeding pack. You can step with each other to capitalize on savings there. So with that being said, I want to thank you all for joining. It is 9:29 and we did promise to have 9:30. So if you have any other questions, feel free to email them over to me or contact any of the speakers. But thank you all very much for coming out, and we look forward to working